We got a thumbs up. We're live.
We're live.
We're live.
What's up, everybody?
How's everybody doing? Again, we're off-site for the Institute of Human Anatomy live session. Justin in through Skype in an undisclosed location. Both of us.
Yes.
So what we're going to do today is we've got a little bit of a surprise. Who knows what's under this bag right here? But spoiler alert, it's going to be some heart anatomy. And so that's where we're going to start today. We're going to go over some valve anatomy. Justin can comment as he sees fit while I pull this out and show people some of the heart anatomy. And then we'll answer some direct questions regarding the heart that we've already had, and then also open it up for questions pretty much about anything. Does that sound good to you, Justin?
That sounds wonderful. Are you saying I get to give a play-by-play of you?
You can critique me, absolutely.
All right.
So, if I would also, if you could, look at the comments and see if there's like a glitch where last week where we had where the video froze, and let me know, because I'll be kind of have my head off the screen there. So, but I'm
here for you. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But I got to glove up, so I'm gonna put the screen on you for right now.
Okay. I will answer a couple questions. How about that?
Yeah.
Or at least one. So, looking in the comments section, hey everybody, everyone's saying hi. Let's kind of scroll. Let's see, what do we got? What? Okay, here's a good one. So, Bradley Nico is asking, what are the causes of atrial fibrillation? I'll even let Jonathan, when he can, show you what that would look like. Causes of atrial fibrillation, it depends on what we mean by cause. If you're talking cause in the sense of it's like what's literally causing the heart to act improperly, it's electrical impulses coming from where they're not supposed to. Typically, it comes from these little spots called the pulmonary veins, and we could even see if Jonathan can try and show you where that would be. But so they're not normally the heart starts beating through something called the sinoatrial node, which is located in the right atrium. But in AFib, there you have these signals coming from the wrong side, and it starts to overwhelm, and so you get just all these crazy signals. So that's a cause. Or you could say coronary artery disease. You could say cardiovascular disease. I've even seen lung issues. I've seen like pneumonia be linked to it. So it kind of depends on what you mean by cause, but hopefully that was a decent answer. Jonathan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's all yours.
We're ready for the unveiling.
Do it.
There we have it. We've got 4 hearts on the table. So a lot of different cool things we have in the hearts, but what we were really going to focus on with the hearts was going to be some valve anatomy. Now, in the heart, there are 4 different valves. Now, each one of these hearts obviously came from a different cadaver, and we've lined them up in the same position here. This one we teach from, actually it's this little guy that we teach from a lot. And one of the things I just want to show is the inside of the left ventricle here. So look how thick and meaty that wall is. The left ventricle actually has to pump to the whole body, and so it's a lot thicker than the wall, if you can see, on the right ventricle right there. Now, like I said, we're mostly going to focus on the valves of the heart. Now, there's 4 valves in the heart, but I want to focus mostly on the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve. And they have some really cool anatomy. This one has a window cut into it that you can see. And if I pull this up, this is a really cool little muscle called the papillary muscle. It's called the papillary muscle because it is a nipple-like projection. And if you go a little further, you can see the little heartstrings that I'm pulling up. And that attaches to the actual flap or the cusp of the valve right there. Now this one's on the right side of the heart, so it has 3 flaps, therefore the tricuspid valve. Now we want blood, if I go through the atrium here, to go through this valve and into the actual right ventricle. We don't want it to come back the opposite direction. So blood can go through, but we want this valve to stop blood from going back into the right atrium where it came from. We actually want it to leave out this pulmonary trunk right there. Now, one of the interesting things is, one of the analogies that I always made with people is, think about those flaps as like one-way doors, like saloon doors though with strings on them. So normally a saloon door flaps both ways, but imagine you tied ropes to the other side of the saloon door. So when you came in to the saloon, it put slack. In other words, when the blood comes in from the right atrium to the right ventricle, the ropes just get slack, and those ropes were the heartstrings, and those are called the chordae tendineae. But when you come back the other way, if the ropes are the right length and those muscles contract properly, it can't swing back the other way. It stops it from going there. So that's how the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve actually work. They stop blood going back in the wrong direction and direct it where it needs to go. Now, one other thing I'll mention here is, just because people talk about heart disease, and Justin mentioned it just a second ago, is you could damage the SA node that Justin mentioned, which actually helps get involved in it's the main initial, I guess you could say, the initiator of the electrical system of the heart. But if you were to clog this artery, which is the left coronary artery, or clog the right coronary artery, you can damage certain areas of the heart. And this is essentially the artery that gets clogged in, say, a heart attack, which the fancy pants term for that is a myocardial infarction. And depending on where in the blood vessel, if it's a small little clot and it actually blocks further downstream, that would do less widespread damage. So again, it depends. And you guys can see these blood vessels actually branch, going down this direction and this direction. And if it's a small clot, then potentially it would affect a smaller area of the heart. Now, one other thing that I want to mention, because I want to pull this up here, if you look on the back side of the heart, these collapsed areas on the heart are the actual atrial chambers. We've cut into them, and this is the actual left atrium right here. It looks literally just like a hollow sac, because the atrial chambers don't have a ton of muscle in them. Here's the right atrium. Now, some people have heard of somebody being born with a hole in their heart. A common one is called an atrial septal defect. If you look here, this is a septum, and I can actually pinch this area right here. It's kind of hard to see, but if I pinch there, the septum is dividing the two atrial chambers. My thumb is in the right atrium, my pointer is in the left atrium, and there's just a little piece of tissue. If I kind of push up, you guys can probably see, hopefully there, let me get in there, or let me get the camera, sorry you guys. If you guys can kind of see me pushing up through that bulge right there that I'm tapping, that is where the hole in the septum would be. You all had a hole when you're inside mom, because you actually will bypass the lungs through that hole. Until you actually are born, that hole will actually seal up, and then blood will go directly into the right ventricle, then to the lungs. And so in people who have atrial septal defect, they actually have the hole that doesn't actually close up like it's supposed to. So hopefully that wasn't too jumbled for you guys, but I'm sure we'll have some other questions on those hearts, so I'll keep them out if you guys have other things you want to see. So, Justin, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I thought you did a fantastic job. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find a good question that you could possibly... I want to see if I can find one that you could even answer with the heart. If you find one before me, you're welcome to.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna pull these from, just kind of going in line here. I'm gonna pull these right from the list here.
Okay.
Johnny Walker, what are capillaries? So capillaries are exchange vessels, and so you have, when you first have blood coming out of the heart, blood goes away from the heart in the arteries, and the arteries start branching. Think of like a major freeway and then just multiple off-ramps going every which direction, and that is arteries branching and getting smaller as they're going to the tissues of the body. As the arteries get smaller, they become arterioles, and then arterioles flow into capillaries. Capillaries are leaky, in other words, meaning oxygen can leak out of the capillaries, and even things can come back in. So essentially the capillaries exchange things like oxygen and carbon dioxide with the tissues that they're in. Typically the oxygen goes out of the capillary into the tissue where carbon dioxide comes in, and that can also go for any other nutrients and waste products. Then the capillary flows into the veins, and the veins go back to the heart, and it kind of circulates through. Now, any waste products will eventually make it to the lungs. If it's carbon dioxide, you'll breathe that out. Other waste products can make it to the liver and the kidneys and those other organs that are involved in helping, say, detoxify the body or excreting things in the urine. It's a good question.
It's a very good question. All right. Let's see. So I've seen a few people asking this. I don't know how to say your name, and I apologize, but it's the user Amrit Sidhu is asking if the chordae tendineae can actually rupture, and they can. I forget its name. It starts with a T. It's like a Japanese takatsu. I forget what it is, but it is possible. It's actually called broken heart syndrome. It's a legitimate thing. I don't know how common it actually is, so I can't speak to that. But I've even seen that it can happen in relatively young people, but it typically does happen in older individuals. It is actually possible, yes, to die from a broken heart. I can't remember many more of the specifics. I don't know if you know anything off the top of your head, Jonathan. What is it? That's going to bug me. I'm going to have to look up what that's called. If anyone can actually let me know what that... It starts with a T. It's like
I can't remember the technical term on that one, actually. But yeah, you can get rupture of the chordae tendineae, and then your valve obviously is going to be compromised in that situation. So I should have looked at another question. I was just so engulfed in what you were going over there.
What can I yes.
So we get a few questions on this. Not normal says, I feel bad, Justin, because you don't have the software to actually put the question on the screen. So there's a question on the screen right now.
That's pretty cool.
Does plaque affect the heart? If so, what are the negative effects from it? So, yes, plaque can essentially narrow the blood vessels. You can get atherosclerosis in other arteries besides, say, the coronary arteries. If it's going to affect the heart, it would be, like I mentioned earlier, those coronary arteries that we showed on the actual hearts there. And so if you narrow that artery in any way, it can compromise the blood flow. And so a lot of times people who have heart attacks or narrowing of those arteries that need an intervention, they'll go to a cath lab, nickname for a catheter, and they'll literally put a device in to essentially expand the artery again to restore blood flow.
Nice. Okay, so I have... This is something... it kind of is a pet peeve of mine, so I really want to kind of just hurry and knock this one out. It's from the user Sophie Ivanova, and they're asking, why do we call veins the blood vessels in which there is an arterial blood coming from the heart? And Jonathan was going over like capillaries and blood vessels. They're all different. I just want to be very clear. I don't know. We all grow up saying everything's a vein, right? Everything's a vein for some reason. It's not like a huge pet peeve. It's not like I'm out there correcting people in the street if they're like, oh, the veins. But at the same time, we shouldn't be calling them all veins. There are arteries, veins, and capillaries. And that's just, sorry, it's a little miniature soapbox, but I saw that question. I couldn't let it pass.
All right. Here's a simple one. Majay Gibson just wants a shout out. All right. Hi, shout out, Majay. If that's how you say your name. I'm horrible at names. That's why I'm putting them on the screen. Okay, so continuing on with some other names. There's so many questions to go through here.
All right, here I got one. So this is from. I don't think I'm going to say anyone's name correctly. Oh wait, Aaliyah Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. I knew it was Takotsubo. I knew it started with a T. I was so close. Thank you, Aaliyah. Ali. I don't know how to say your name, but I see you and thank you. But there's another one from, where did it go? Maybe I lost it. Here it is. From Nawal Munawar, wants to know what clogs the coronary arteries. So this is what we call like atherosclerosis, basically, and it's called plaque. Here's the thing, is a lot of people don't understand how this really works. When you're talking to people about how plaque forms within blood vessels, a lot of times people think like it's literally inside the blood vessel tube. The thing to understand is blood vessels actually have layers. And the plaque isn't forming where the blood is typically. It's actually in the blood vessel wall. And what's happened is white blood cells have, so, okay, think about it like this. Like, you get some kind of injury, cholesterol, fats, those types of things actually start to go into the blood vessel wall. White blood cells then go and attack it, and then they eat and gorge themselves until they themselves are too filled and they don't really have an exit, and they essentially just die, and it just starts building and building. And so what happens is the blood vessel starts narrowing down, and as it narrows down, you get a closing off, and that can happen in pretty much any blood vessel. But if it happens in the coronary arteries, the problem is you can't then effectively deliver blood and oxygen to the heart tissue, and then obviously you can get a heart attack. But great question, Nawal Munawar.
Okay. Justin, I put my glasses on now, so just don't worry. It's still me. I know you have issues with that, like, the whole Clark Kent Superman
Where did he go?
thing. Yeah,
Where did he go?
I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Carmen Turbuck, my husband had lung cancer and had atrial defibrillation, and what is the Twave abnormalities? Carmen, I actually feel a little bit bad about this because I put this on here mostly to say that if I had a whole bunch of different EKGs ready and waiting, I could put them on here and show you kind of what some Twave abnormalities will be. So bear with us, and when I get those a couple of EKG strips that I can put on the screen, we can address that. It's really hard to do it with my hands and talk about Twave abnormalities without showing you on an EKG. So we will get to that sooner rather than later. I had another question picked out, Justin.
Go for it.
But I lost it.
How dare you?
I know, seriously. If I find it again, I'll get it and then go. But do you have one available right now?
I didn't. I'll be honest. I was just kind of scanning through. I can find one though. Let's see. So, let me see if I can say it. So, Giselle Candelaria. Again, I didn't say that at all correctly, and I apologize. Wants to know, how do low hemoglobin levels affect the heart? So the thing to understand about hemoglobin, and you hear this a lot lately, especially with what's going on with the virus and everything, hemoglobin is essential for, binding to oxygen. It also binds to carbon dioxide. And so it's what red blood cells are made of. In fact, red blood cells are some of the most simple cells out there because they pretty much they got rid of everything they could to make as much surface area for hemoglobin so they could attach as much oxygen as possible. If you have low hemoglobin levels, basically you also could have, and that can mean that you have low red blood cell count. This could be like but if you have low hemoglobin, you're not able to process oxygen effectively and get rid of carbon dioxide effectively. And the effect it's going to have on the heart is you can literally start to have, you could almost think of it like a slow moving heart attack of sorts, where you're starting to get oxygen starvation. It's going to make the heart have to work harder, and it doesn't have the fuel it needs to do its job as effectively as possible.
Cool. I'm going to answer this one. I found it. Mary, I'm an anatomy student, and heart is our study material for the exams. I have a question I never got to answer. The coronary artery is pushing blood into the right side. Pushing blood into the right side. How does it oxygenate it? Well, let me just clarify this. So remember I mentioned those coronary arteries, and I think this is an important question because the heart itself needs oxygenated blood. And how it gets oxygenated blood is the first branch off the aorta is essentially those coronary arteries. And so when the right side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs, all of that blood gets oxygenated and comes back to the left side of the heart. And then the left side of the heart catches it in the left atrium, pushes it through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, and then the left ventricle is the strongest chamber of the heart that squeezes it into the aorta. If you guys want to see the size of an aorta, you can check out our Instagram feed. We just showed people the size of the aorta. It's about the size of a garden hose. But in that aorta that's about the size of a garden hose, the first two little branches are the right and left coronary arteries. Remember, all that blood just came from the lungs, But the first stop, the first priority in a way, is getting that oxygenated blood to the actual heart muscle itself. And again, that's where the heart attack's the issue. If you block off that blood supply in those coronary arteries, your heart's not going to be happy.
All right. I have to hurry and say this because Giselle, who I just answered her question, is asking when was the last time I played Pandemic? That's because you probably can see behind me there is an amazing board game called Pandemic, which is crazy relevant for today. I haven't played it in a while, but last time we played it, we beat it. And for those of you who know how hard Pandemic is, you should be impressed right now. So I just had to mention that. It's a really fun game. We should like get a sponsorship from whoever makes that for touting Pandemic. It's a fantastic game.
That's awesome. That's super awesome. Just reiterating, if anybody has joined us late, we've been going for about 20 minutes. And if you have any questions on here that you feel like we're ignoring, it may be because we already covered it. We already went through heart holes. We went over the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve. We showed the heart strings, which are the chordae tendineae. And so is there anything else that we covered that I didn't mention there, Justin?
I think you're good. I think that's it.
All right. Let's keep going. So we've got nice board games in the back. I just came across that one.
Thanks.
Ooh, I do want to mention this. My dad just got a pacemaker. So, my dad just got a pacemaker and a biventricular leads. Can you explain how a general pacemaker works and what the significance of the biventricular lead is? I'm not too well versed on the biventricular leads. I got excited about this essentially because we actually have a heart. Whoops, I got to glove up again. With a pacemaker. So bear with me, you guys. You can look at Justin's pretty face while I'm gloving up. Sorry, Justin, put you on the spot there.
It's okay.
Smile big.
Maybe we could just talk about board games while you're getting.
Okay.
We play a lot of board games.
The reason I just wanted to show this because this is super awesome. I don't know if you guys can see this, but we have a wire to an actual pacemaker here. So now the wiring goes into the heart, and essentially what the pacemaker is supposed to do is take over for an electrical system of the heart that has failed. And most people keep the actual device of the pacemaker up in the chest, and that's because you don't want to essentially have something that might need to be replaced underneath the ribs. And so a lot of times you'll see the actual components and I guess you could say the battery source, the power source of the pacemaker, actually more superficial on top of the ribs. But the initial surgery, they have to get the wiring directly into the heart. It's pretty amazing what we can do with some of these surgeries.
All right, so this is a question that from Nikki Rabi that I've been asked so many times. I remember when this picture came out a few years ago, students were just like bombarding me asking if it's real. And is it true that your heart turns completely white when all the blood is drained from it? And that is not true. That picture, I've done extensive research into that picture that's been floating everywhere. Those are actually leftover proteins. So what they did is they pretty much washed away all the cells. And so you're looking at, you could almost think of it like a scaffolding network of protein. And so that's why it appears white. A heart that's drained of blood is still going to have a red appearance. So that's kind of a little myth buster thing right there for you.
All right, I like this one here. How does diabetes affect arteries and therefore become a factor in heart disease? Well, kind of a generalized answer is if you have excess blood sugar levels, so you've got a whole bunch of extra glucose circulating through the blood vessels and the smaller vessels, you can get essentially damage to the microvasculature. And literally think of it as almost irritating the inside lining of the blood vessels, and they get inflamed. And this can cause problems, and the blood flow is therefore decreased in those areas. Like you see a lot of times with people, in diabetes where they have neuropathy, and that's usually secondary to the blood supply to those nerves being compromised because of excess blood sugar circulating throughout the vasculature, and that can be a big deal. Now, normal levels, that happens all the time, but when I've seen some high blood sugar levels, people in the 500s, and they maintain that for a long period of time, or they have uncontrolled diabetes, that's just an overload to all sorts of just different systems, not even just the cardiovascular system. And so the kidneys try to get rid of it in some cases, and then you'll see it in the urine, and you'll see all sorts of different compromises that can happen. But it's essentially going to cause a problem with the microvasculature of the cardiovascular system. And I've got another one, Justin, unless you've got one.
Go for it.
Is it true you can train your heart by doing cardiovascular activity, strengthen it? Absolutely. So your heart can get stronger and more effective at pumping blood. That's a lot of times when people will see their resting heart rate go down when they exercise, and part of the reason for the heart rate going down is each pump of blood becomes more efficient as the heart gets stronger, and so therefore you could kind of think of it as, okay, I don't have to beat as many times per minute to deliver the same amount of blood and oxygen to the tissues. And so yeah, your myocardium, or your cardiac muscle cells, will actually get stronger and strengthen.
All right. Let's see. How much longer are we going, Jonathan?
Probably just 4 more minutes. We're at 26.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see here. Samuel Lopez, I think that's supposed to be Lopez. I'm not sure. Again, I can't say names. Wants to know what an arteriovenous fistula is. So a fistula is just when basically things are connected that aren't supposed to be. So this could actually, you could be born with this, and it's where you have arteries and veins that are connected to each other. Again, they're not supposed to be because they have different oxygen levels and pressures. But typically this is performed for people going through like dialysis for kidneys, and a lot of times you can do this anywhere. You could make a fistula anywhere, but typically I think they do it like in the upper arm. And the idea here is just to kind of have blood going away from the heart go into this dialysis machine, and then it goes right back into a vein in the same connection. So, but an arteriovenous fistula is just a connection that's not supposed to be there between an artery and a vein.
Okay. All right, we have another one here. I'm going to be really bad at pronouncing that name, so you guys can see it on screen. I'm sorry about that, but how does high blood pressure affect the heart? Well, you can kind of think of high blood pressure as sometimes, some people will refer to it as like the silent killer. Sometimes it's a little dramatic in my mind, but I'm not saying it's a good thing at all. But the reason why they call it silent is because most high blood pressure is asymptomatic. People don't know they have it unless they actually go and get tested for it. And so if you think that somebody has uncontrolled blood pressure for years and years, you have to essentially assume that the heart is being overworked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for years and years, if they go years without controlling it. And that's not the only thing that gets potentially damaged. There's potentially other organs that are affected by uncontrolled hypertension or high blood pressure, like the kidneys, even the eyes can be affected. And so a lot of times when a clinician first sees somebody with high blood pressure, they'll kind of do a workup and an exam. They'll look at their eyes and do tests to check kidney function and things of that nature, just to see if there's been any other, I guess, carryover besides just affecting the heart itself.
Awesome. See if I can find something here. Unless you have something ready. I don't have anything ready at the moment.
Okay, I can throw one in here.
Okay.
Does angina have something to do with the heart? Typically, yeah. Angina is angina pectoris, is often referred to as the fancy pants name for chest pain. And a lot of times there's what's called stable angina and unstable angina. Stable angina is, or angina, is essentially something pretty similar to, it's stable. It's like it's controllable, or I shouldn't say controllable. It's predictable. For example, somebody with stable angina might essentially be somebody who's starting to get narrowing of the coronary arteries, and say they start going up the stairs, or hiking up the stairs, or they exert themselves. Their heart starts working harder, and they start to get chest pain, and then as soon as they rest, it goes away. And that's what they mean by predictable, like when they call it stable angina. And that can be, for some people, indicator that they're knocking on the door of potential heart attack. It's an indicator of coronary artery disease, or at least the narrowing of those arteries. I see a ton of people come in with chest pain to the urgent care clinics. Ironically, most of them are like in their 20s. At least that's from me. I see it, and it's usually musculoskeletal chest pain. But anytime you feel pain anywhere in this area, people kind of get nervous about the heart. But back to the angina. The unstable angina is when we start worrying about that, and chest pain comes on in situations where people aren't necessarily exerting themselves. And that's kind of a more serious thing. You're starting to wonder or worry, is this a heart attack? Is this knocking right on the door of a heart attack? Because now it's not happening as a predictable thing. I can't rest and have that chest pain kind of resolve, if that makes sense.
Nice.
You have another one, Justin? One more?
Let's see. I had one, and then I lost it. What was it? Where was it? I lost it. Where was it?
I do want to mention something while you're looking, Justin.
Okay.
As you guys can tell, it is kind of tricky to keep up with everybody's questions. One of the things that we always hoped to do with this situation is be at the actual lab. But with COVID and the social distancing, Justin and I have not been sick ever, but since this has all happened, but we've tried to kind of do our part and keep our distance. We have been at the lab together. We, again, try to keep our distance while we're there, but doing a live session with each other side by side, we decided we'd try to follow these guidelines and kind of support the cause, if you will. Anyway, with that spiel being done here, our hope was to be at the lab, which meant that one of us could be grabbing parts while the other person was answering questions. So we could show you guys a cool cadaver part to answer your question. And so if you guys are feeling like there's some questions that are being unanswered, a lot of it's probably going through our brains of like, oh, that'd be awesome if we actually had the cadaver. I've seen a lot of EKG questions also on electrical systems of the heart. That stuff can be complex, and I think it is probably not well suited for just a quick live session, just because we would need EKG sheets and like an actual heart rhythm to show people that. And that's definitely something that we'll consider to do. It's just, I feel like it would just not give you a lot of good information to do it that way. So, like I said, we're continuing to refine this process. When we get back to the lab, we'll have a lot more cadaver education we could use on a live session. So hopefully that gave you some time, Justin, to find a question.
It did. I actually couldn't find the question, but I found another one. So
okay.
This is from Samantha San Antonio, and she's asking, what is the baroreceptor reflex? So a baroreceptors are these they're neurons, so you can think of them as they're analyzing blood pressure. So if blood pressure goes too high, then what will happen is these will kind of get triggered, and then the heart rate can start to kind of slow down a little bit to try and adjust it. So just think of it as the baroreceptor reflex is your body's natural way of trying to really specifically control the blood pressure that your blood vessels are experiencing at any given time. So, and the baroreceptors are located like all over. And I know they're in the carotid arteries, they're in the atria. So they're kind of distributed all around here just to make sure that your blood is at the proper pressure.
Okay. Well, that probably is going to do it for us today, everybody. Again, we appreciate all the support, and like it is, it's like a good overwhelming to have the support and the questions. We really appreciate all the questions, and if you didn't get your question answered, keep sending it. We'll hopefully eventually get to it. And we're trying to do YouTube videos, formal videos, 1 to 2 times a week, and we appreciate you guys watching those. And then, I don't know, do you have anything else to add, Justin?
No, not really. Just again, we're always appreciative of every single one of you, and thanks for bearing with us as you get to see this Skype call strange way of doing a live session. So I just really appreciate your patience.
Okay. Until next week, everybody. See you later.
See ya.